Hi class, Laura Klein here, and this is your announcement video for week 3. Last week we did a bunch of quizzes, and I just wanted to give you a few reminders. Everything is graded, so please go in and look and see if you have any feedback on any of the questions. So look at the comments. A couple of general reminders. Remember to hit submit when you finish your quizzes. Otherwise it looks like it's in progress for me and I can't see your answers. So make sure you're hitting submit at the end. And then also about apostrophes, keep in mind that there are some special rules with apostrophes for words that end in S or words that are plural, and the apostrophe goes after the S then, and there were a couple of those in the quiz, so you might see that you missed a couple of those if you forgot that those are special exemptions, especially with the one about parents' house. I put the little reminder there that that's plural parents, and so the apostrophe would go at the end after the S. That's pretty much for last week, what I've got. It was pretty straightforward. Just go in and make sure that you got your points for the work that you completed. And for this week, your first lecture is posted, your first video lecture. Please be sure to watch the lectures. So since we're not meeting in class, that's really the content of the class. There aren't a ton of lectures that I'm asking you to watch. There's not one every week or things like that. It's really important that you do watch the content for the class, especially the lectures. And then you'll have your first extra credit quiz. So lecture and reading, it's important that you do these, but I'm not seeing you face-to-face in class so that we can talk about them. So the way that I see that you do them is I give you the opportunity to get some credit for them in the form of an extra credit quiz. They're worth 5 points, but you can't use 5 extra points here and there, and you'll have a few of them throughout the semester. So that's going to cover the reading that I'm asking you to do. It's quite a bit of reading. You'll have quite a bit of reading for many of the weeks in this class. So make sure you're pacing your reading and not saving everything until the end of the week. Otherwise, you'll be rushing to get through that reading, and then you won't be getting as much out of it. And it's what you're going to use. It's the basis for your writing, especially when we get into reading the short stories. If you're going to be writing about a story, you probably want to read it more than once, but I'll talk about that next week as we really get into writing. So there's an extra credit quiz, and the other assignment this week is the discussion board. This is going to be your first sort of try at doing some analysis. The video lecture is about summary versus analysis, so you're really trying to move into doing a little bit of literary analysis of a couple of short stories that are in the introduction to fiction part of the chapter in week 3. And remember that the week 3 assignments are in the fiction tab, Unit 1 fiction, so that's a little different than last week. And there's a reminder about that, but now we're moving into Unit 1, and then there will be a second unit, and then that'll be pretty much it. So when you're going through this fiction unit, realize that the poetry unit, which comes in Unit 2, will be very similar. So this discussion board at the beginning of the week is asking you for a thesis statement and a supporting quote, at least one. And I've done a post on the discussion board to sort of show you what I'm looking for, so you can use it as an example. And I did mine about Linda Brewer's story 2020, which is in the introduction. The other story you can write about is Cathedral by Raymond Carver. 2020 is very short, and I want to remind you about this now, and I'll remind you about it again. Don't always pick the shortest one. That's not always the best one. It's actually kind of harder to write about something that's really short, especially when it gets into longer writing. There's definitely more to write about in the Carver story, but my example is from 2020. So the sample writer, I'm asking you to how your interpretation maybe differs from what the sample writer says. So the sample writer kind of puts forth on page 20 that the story is about characters falling in love, and as they move west, they're going into more sort of unknown territory, and that's kind of like them falling in love with one another. And so my interpretation is different than that. My interpretation focuses more on the change within one character, the narrator, Bill. Bill, right? I think so. And so my thesis is basically about the way that he sees Ruthie at the beginning and how it's very different from the way he sees Ruthie at the end in this shorter than one-page story. So you can check out my thesis on the discussion board there, and also the textual examples that I'm using. So I'm using 2. There's actually 3 quotes, but I'm really looking at 2 small passages of the story. The first one at the beginning of the story where Bill talks about how Linda is very literal in her interpretations of things, and then one from later in the story where he realizes that he's actually the one that's being literal and she is actually seeing things in a different way. Um, and he realizes that when she says she sees Bigfoot, and he looks back and sees that it's actually just a reflector. Um, and there are other ways you can read that, right? My interpretation is obviously not the only one because there's a different one in the book, and I can think of other ones, or could think of other ones as I was reading. You might look at language, you might look at metaphors, you might look at just one passage and its significance, lots of different things that you could say, even about that tiny little story. And there are tons of things you could say about Cathedral. So I'm hoping to see a lot of different interpretations. You're just required to do your posts this week. However, you're going to get something probably out of engaging with each other in a conversation, if that's something you want to do, if you want to comment respectfully on other people's posts as well. The load this week for your assignments is pretty light, so if you want to get ahead, go ahead and take a peek into weeks 4 and 5. There's really a lot to do coming up as we move into doing 2 reader responses in a row in weeks 4 and 5. And those reader responses are 500 words, I believe, and they're worth 100 points. They're sort of higher stakes assignments, so they're something that you want to take more time on, although they are leading up to the 200-point major essay of, I believe, 1,500 words that'll come at the end of the unit. So this unit will go through, I think, week 8, maybe week 9, and then we'll move into the second one, and it'll be the same pattern, 2 reader responses, and then the major essay. So definitely consider getting ahead, especially with the reading. If you find that the load is light this week, you're not doing your 7 to 8 expected hours of working on the class. I know we had a 3-day weekend. Hopefully you had a nice break, and now you'll be getting ahead so that you can stay on top of things as we move into the more writing-heavy portions of the unit. So hopefully that helps. Please let me know if you have any questions, and I'll talk to you later. Have a great week.